was just gonna say.
Bye.
Hey guys, this is Ryan. This is other Ryan. I'm Josh.
That's Josh.
We're gonna do some Serum stuff today.
I'm gonna teach you guys a thing or two about a thing or two.
Anyway, here's Serum.
Here's Serum. So when you open Serum, you are greeted by the mighty Xfer interface, the UI. Right here we have oscillator A, we have oscillator B. You can toggle whether or not the oscillator is active by pushing right here. You have a filter, right, and we'll get into that later. You have a couple of envelopes down here. Envelope number 1, this guy highlighted, is connected to the master volume, otherwise known as the amplitude. More on that later. And then you have the LFOs down here. There are 4 hidden LFOs. Again, more on that later. Think of an envelope as moving from one place on a map to another place on a map. And think of an LFO as the invisible knob turner. Not to be confused with oscillator A or B, though. So there's going to be a couple of fluid definitions.
So then what are the other two are just frequency oscillators, so you can set it really at whatever.
I don't think it's even frequency. It just oscillates anything.
It oscillates anything. It's just, it turns whatever you assign it to. So for example, like if we take LFO1 and just click and drag it to the level of oscillator A, it will quite literally oscillate the level, right?
Okay.
And if you adjust this little blue line here, that's going to be called our depth. Click trigger on LFO1, so that way we start at the bottom here, right? Because we read from left to right in the cycle. And there we go. Let's turn this guy down just a smidge.
Just a smidge.
What you're doing to trigger that is you're using the keyboard on your computer, right?
I'm using my musical typing.
Musical typing.
Yeah, it's called musical typing.
Do you press M to activate that?
On mine I do. I don't know if everybody's does that.
It's Shift K in Pro Tools if anyone cares to know.
Let's just make a couple of very basic sounds. I'm not going to use the LFO yet because it's not dubstep time. It will be dubstep time eventually, but right now it is not dubstep time.
Oh, no.
So when we assign an envelope or any parameter in Serum, or really any synthesizer, we have 2 things. We have 1, which is the source, 2 is the destination, right? The source is the thing that you assign to the destination, which is the thing that moves after the assignment has been made, right? So in this case, we have assigned envelope 1, right, our amplitude envelope, this sort of shark finny pluck type guy. Right now, this little blue line on our cutoff goes in both directions. This is going to be called bipolar, right? We want to set this from bipolar to unipolar, so what we're going to do is hit Shift, Option, and click, and you see half the line disappears, right?
Oh, sick.
And now you can see that when I hit a note,
It's not doing that.
it's not, exactly, it's not going in both directions. So if I hit Shift, Option, it's going to go from the center all the way down, right? So as a general rule for me, this is just my personal preference, I prefer to keep things unipolar just because keeping track of like bipolarity as far as like assignments goes is a pain in the ass. Right now, I've just kind of brought some of the depth down and I've brought my filter cutoff down, and now I'm just going to add a little bit more drive so that we can hear, and I'm going to add a little bit more filter resonance. And the more filter resonance I add, the more pronounced the sort of vowel texture is going to be as the filter sweeps from all the way to the top to the bottom of whatever the depth assignment is. So if I turn this up, you can see that we start getting a real large spike. Then if we go to the effects tab, right, there's sort of this holy trinity. Shouts out my buddy Protohype for coining that phrase. And the holy trinity is a little bit of hyperdimension, right, which is just going to give us some stereo width, tube drive, some distortion, right? Personally, because I'm a rock dude before I am a sound designer, I really like this stomp box distortion curve. As you can see, it's a little bit harder curve. We'll switch the compressor from the single band option, which you can see is not really doing any compression at all, but we're going to flip it to multiband, and that's going to be Serum's internal OTT. OTT stands for over the top.
Does it actually?
Yeah.
I never knew that's what OTT meant.
Yeah. So if you open OTT from Ableton, right, this is just kind of the standard view right here. You can see that we have 3 bands, high, mids, and lows. Input gain, output gain, upward compression, downward compression, and output is set to 0. Time is set to 100%. Most of the time, I would like to work with time all the way up to 1,000. This is just our attack and release time. Keeps things kind of clean and tidy. So let me.
So wait. This way on time, faster attack,
faster attack, faster release, I believe.
Slower time, slower attack, slower release.
Oh, that's a super fast, right? You put it up to 1,000 for your attacks. So that's like.
Yeah, but you see how in the Serum OTT you actually have separate attack and release time here. So for a sound like a pluck, right?
Right.
I want long release time, so that way the compressor stays compressing until the very end. Versus like if I had it all the way down, see how it's got so much like more noise in it. It sounds just a little bit more clean. So what we'll do here is add the OTT back. And see how that just like hits a lot harder as the I turn the time up.
It slaps a little more.
Exactly, right?
Ooh, it's got that little.
It's got like the harder attack, the harder artifacts, right?
It's snapping.
So this is just a quick little saw wave pluck. I'm going to revert this to the initial preset. Boom. And I'm going to delete this OTT from now, and I'm going to show you something a little bit more applicable. Like, for example, if you are a modern tech house fan, I would not be surprised if you know who John Summit is. And so John Summit tends, from what I hear in his music, to use basic shapes for most of his sound design. I am a huge fan of basic shapes. If we use the sub oscillator, right, what I like to do is hit this direct out button. And this is a pretty pure noise, right? If I bring this down, we start to kind of like lose some like of the oomph because we're already in a very low octave anyway. But as you cycle the wavetable position, right, that's this knob down here, WT pos. Wavetable position, if we use basic shapes, means that we will cycle, let's turn off oscillator B. We will cycle through all the basic shapes. So if I hold down this low E, we have a saw wave, triangle, square, pulse 1, pulse 2, and that's like a combination of a square triangle type guy. I don't use this one really ever.
Rhombus?
Dodecahedron?
That's a fun word.
Yeah, that's the only thing I remember from school times.
I went to school once. If you use something, for example, like, I don't know, Icon Has Kick, which is a native wavetable in Serum, as you cycle this wavetable position knob, you can see that the waveform changes, right? So with some noise, so if I just kind of like, if I bring the octave down, right, and I turn the filter on, and we use the sustain, bring that down, assign the envelope, shift, option, click, right?
For unipolar, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm learning something.
Like that's kind of like you just add some OTT and
we're
a kick
suddenly
drum,
at EDC.
4 on the floor, boom, you're done, dude.
I think it's interesting, like when you're looking at that wave, because it is a kick sample. Like it's like when the waves are tight, it's like that's your click, and then as it goes on, it's like the whoop, 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 whoop,
Yeah.
you know.
When you press the keys, you're generating a signal.
Yep.
That's then being fed to the oscillator.
Yep.
And that shape that we're seeing, how directly does that shape affect the sound we're hearing?
Yeah, it is the sound that you're hearing.
So you're creating a signal that's whatever hertz the note you're pressing is, and then it's just being run through that shape.
Exactly. The frequency is the amount of cycles per second, right? Which changes...
Which decides the note, but not the sound of the note.
Right. It's
the disruption of the harmonics changes the timbre of the
But
sound.
not the note.
But not necessarily the note, right?
The frequency changes the note.
Yeah.
okay.
So the speed at which... The speed of the cycles per second is the note.
Right.
But the amount of disruption within that amount of cycles per section
causes the.
it as a technical term.
It does though.
Yeah.
No, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, it causes
that's the timbre. Yes,
That's the timbre.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So like for example.
No. The zhuzh.
No.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
exactly. Let's use the sub oscillator. Let's hit direct out just so we have some bottom end, right? And I'm going to go over here. I'm going to use basic shapes again. And instead of using a sine wave in oscillator B, I'm going to cycle the wavetable position. And we'll just use a triangle wave. And we'll bring this guy up an octave just to see what that sounds like. And so if I turn down oscillator A volume, now what we're left with is the sub and oscillator B. And you can hear that we have the higher note, or the higher octave, which would be double the amount of cycles per second,
right,
coming out of oscillator B. Right? So if I turn this back up, that's where we get some of that grit. So the zzz. We'll play with a couple different like timbre options to dial this sort of sound in, right? I'm gonna hit Shift Option to go from bipolar to unipolar. Right, so higher cutoff means more high end, right? Lower cutoff means
you're taking out more high end.
Exactly, right?
It's confusing how that works.
And so if I want even more high end, but I don't want to change the cutoff, I can change the level of oscillator B by turning this up. Or I can turn the level of oscillator A down. And this is kind of where people run into problems because they're like, oh, well, what's right? And it's like, well, whatever sounds best for what is contextually appropriate. You want your sounds to be blended. You want them to make sense together, right?
So right now we're rocking with a signal generator, 2 oscillators, and this filter. When do these envelopes start to get involved?
Well, so we're already using envelope 1, right?
Okay.
And envelope 1 is, again, our amplitude envelope, right? Which is directly attached to the master in Serum. I got this sort of shark fin shape, and I've assigned it...
That's what's making it sound like a pluck, correct?
Exactly. So anytime you see or want a pluck, think shark fin, and, you know, just drag down, for example, the sustain, right? So when you open Serum, it will look like this. This is a square, and you just drag down the sustain, and we're already on our way.
So if you were to make, you know those like those R&B like schwamp synths that are like schwamp, you know what I mean? You would just drag you would just slow your attack down, and like could you just drag your shark fin to be a little farther out in the water?
Well, you would drag.
I love analogy. Yeah, but like that.
Oh, now it's getting further out in the water.
Like the schwamp, womp, womp. Yeah. Okay, dude, I have been trying to learn how to do that, and I feel like every time I do it, I like end up over here somewhere.
No.
Like it's like not.
Bring the attack up. Right, so when you bring...
Your release is already down.
Yeah, but originally it was a square, you bring that down, right, and then you slide it.
Think about it like this. Down is to the left, up is to the right.
That's helpful.
Okay.
Right, so when we want to bring the sustain down so that we can create a pluck sound, we would turn it to the left, right? But if we want to create sort of a womp sound, I mean, that's the sound of a filter opening up with a little bit of resonance, right? Mm-hmm. And in order to do that, we would increase or bring up or turn the knob to the right on the attack.
There's the wub.
And if we want, you know, something a little bit...
Woo! What was that?
I just turned up the octave on oscillator 2.
Triangle? Yeah.
All right, so what we're going to do here is we're going to sort of modernize this like John Somebody type of bass thing. Normally, I wouldn't suggest using a multiband for this type of sound because it kind of makes the attack a little bit too hard.
Crunchy.
So what we'll do is we'll find another OTT in here, and you know you can hear that that's just, you know, squished to all hell, right? And all you gotta do is turn up the output, and I like to turn down.
But that's weird. So you turn the output up, and it sounds less crunchy and more full. Is it just because I'm not hearing it loud?
I think that's part of it. That's also just like OTT 101 in Ableton.
It's like you just
that shit took me years to figure out.
It's so simple.
Repeat that.
Just if you want it to be less like aggressively like crunchy because of the compression. I mean, like this usually starts at about 10 decibels, right? So we'll bring that back up.
Yeah,
so you see how we have that like artifact at the end, that buzz.
Mm-hmm.
Turn the time all the way up, and then turn the output up.
Huh.
And then turn the output of the high band down.
Ooh.
Right?
That's knocking.
So check this out, right? We're going to hit Shift Command M. And the note I was using was a low E. So let's find our low E.
Let's it is.
Zoom in. And turn on our audition mode. So what we'll do is we'll grab a 909 kick.
It's funny, I feel like growing up I hated like the 80s sounds, and now because they were so not cool, it's cool now.
That's how everything works.
How I feel too.
It's like
when something's not cool anymore, that's when it's like, yeah.
But it's like really good songs. So they're good songs.
There's good songs in every era though.
That's not true.
Oh, absolutely, it's true.
That's not true.
There's an entire era where no good songs are made.
Yeah.
Now. Right now is one of those eras. There are no good songs.
What, you listened to Yeet the other day or what?
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Oh shit, did you just make that?
Yeah. What we'll do here, just to get some drums in, you know, for some context. Every other measure, we'll do these eighth note claps. Let's see, 909 hat.
Ooh. Ooh.
There we go. He's just like, I want to go to the club now. So there we go.
Wow.
That's how you make a pluck and throw it into some context.
Thank you so much, Ryan.
You're welcome.
Holy crap.
Now let's make some fucking cool noises.